The roar of the crowd was deafening as Jake took his seat in the packed arena. He tugged at his collar, feeling suffocated by the sea of faces surrounding him on all sides. His palms grew clammy as he scanned the bleachers, searching for any empty spots he could escape to. But there was no reprieve from the swarming horde tonight. Jake had hoped attending the company basketball game would help him break out of his shell after years spent as a recluse. But being trapped in the crush of humanity was everything he dreaded. His social anxiety had only worsened since the incident in college that shattered his confidence and trust in others. Now, large groups sent his heart racing in a panic. As the opening tip-off began, Jake tried focusing on the game, hoping the distraction would calm his nerves. But his eyes kept drifting to the crowds, paranoid someone might notice his unease. That's when he spotted a man a few rows back, intently studying the spectators rather than watching the action on the court. Something about the stranger set Jake on edge. He was alone, yet seemed completely at ease in the mayhem. Unlike Jake, his face was obscured by the brim of a baseball cap, pulled low as if to conceal his identity. But it was his unwavering stare, scanning the bleachers, that unsettled Jake the most. The man appeared to be searching for something or someone in the throngs. Jake tried rationalizing his suspicions, blaming his anxiety for making something out of nothing. But his gut told him to keep an eye on the mysterious figure. As the first quarter wound down, Jake noticed the man get up and exit through the side doors. He debated following, but didn't want to miss any of the game action either. In the end, his fears won out, and he stayed put. At halftime, Jake went in search of refreshments to distract himself. But the concession lines were packed as thousands crammed in for snacks and drinks during the break. Growing impatient, Jake decided to head back to his seat early. That's when he spotted a commotion up ahead. People were shouting and crowding around something on the floor between the bleachers. Pushing through, Jake's blood ran cold at the sight before him. Sprawled on the concrete was a man lying in a growing pool of blood. A gunshot wound to the back of his head left no doubt as to the cause of death. Pandemonium erupted as spectators realized a murder had just occurred, right under their noses. Jake's mind raced as police and paramedics swarmed the scene. How could someone be killed so brazenly in a crowded public place without anyone noticing? His eyes scanned the area, recalling the strange man from earlier. Could he have been scoping out targets rather than just watching the game? A serial killer on a rampage would explain the precision shot and hasty exit without causing a scene. As the investigation got underway and the game was postponed, Jake volunteered what little information he had to the lead detective. He described the suspicious man and the direction he had left in. The detective thanked Jake for his cooperation, but was skeptical. One witness account amounted to a solid lead without more evidence. In the chaos of evacuation, Jake noticed his co-worker, Steve, looking around frantically. "Have you seen Amanda?" he asked, on the verge of panic. Amanda was Steve's wife, who had accompanied him to the game. Jake helped Steve search to no avail, as police cleared out the stadium. That's when another discovery was made, a woman's body lying near one of the exit tunnels. Steve broke down in tears upon confirming it was Amanda. She had been shot just like the first victim at close range. Jake's blood ran cold as the implications set in. This was no random act of violence. A methodical killer was targeting individuals one by one in the crowds. And with thousands of potential victims still evacuating outside, the body count was sure to rise if the madman wasn't stopped. Rushing home, Jake booted up his computer and pulled up the company database. As a data analyst, He had access to employee profiles and was skilled at finding patterns. He cross-referenced attendance records with the victims to see if there was a connection. Both worked in the accounting department, but had no other obvious links. That's when Jake noticed something odd. Both had recently turned down a promotion to take on more responsibilities in their roles. Scrolling further, he discovered the promotion had been offered by a new department manager, hired only a few months prior. Searching employee profiles, Jake pulled up the photo of the man and froze in horror. It was the same face he had seen lurking in the stadium, now with a name: Daniel Brooks. Jake picked up his phone with a shaking hand. He had to warn the police. Their prime suspect was still out there and likely targeting more employees who had rejected Brooks' offers. But it was too late. As the line rang through, news reports came on confirming 2 additional bodies had been found in the arena parking lots. The death toll was rising fast, and Brooks was using the chaos of evacuation to pick off stragglers one by one. Jake knew he had to act before more innocent lives were lost. As the only witness who got a good look at Brooks, it was up to him to profile the killer, predict his next moves, and put an end to the rampage before the body count grew any higher. But to do that, he would have to confront the demons from his past and face his greatest fears head-on. For the first time in years, Jake would have to step out of isolation and take a shot at stopping a madman on a murderous mission. The question was, would he be able to act in time before Brooks claimed his next victim? The shrill ring of Jake's phone jolted him awake with a start. He fumbled for it on his nightstand, heart pounding as the display showed an unknown number. "Hello," he answered tentatively. "Jake, it's Detective Roberts. We've got another 2 bodies." The grim tone confirmed Jake's worst fears. Brooks was still on the loose, and his killing spree showed no signs of slowing. "Any leads on the suspect?" Jake asked, already knowing the answer. If police had a solid tip, Roberts wouldn't be calling him at this hour. Nothing concrete yet. Ballistics confirmed the same weapon was used in all the murders. We've issued an app, but the guy seems to have vanished. Roberts sighed wearily. "Look, you're the only witness we've got who saw this Brooks character. I was hoping you could help us get inside his head, figure out where he might strike next." Jake knew stalling wouldn't save lives. He had to use his skills no matter the personal cost. "Give me some time to analyze the case files. I'll do what I can to profile him and predict his pattern." Hanging up, Jake booted up his computer and dove into a deep dive of open-source research. He started by cross-referencing Brooks' employee record with public databases, uncovering a troubled past. Multiple arrests for domestic violence and assault suggested deep-seated anger issues. Further digging revealed Brooks' wife had filed a restraining order before their divorce, claiming he was unstable and dangerous when enraged. Next, Jake analyzed the case files sent over by Roberts. All 4 victims so far had worked under Brooks and rejected his promotion offers. But what was the real motive beyond mere retaliation? Jake noticed the shots were precision kills to vital organs, showing detailed knowledge of human anatomy. This wasn't random violence. It was meticulously planned. That's when a disturbing theory started forming in Jake's mind. He pulled up the employee profiles again, this time focusing solely on photos. As he studied each face, a pattern emerged that made his blood run cold. All the victims shared a similar appearance. They were of a similar height, build, and even had matching eye and hair colors. It was then Jake realized he fit the same physical profile too. Brooks was targeting surrogates, Jake realized with dread, reenacting past grievances on those resembling those who had wronged him. But why these 4 specific employees? Jake dug deeper, uncovering the one damning link. They all bore an uncanny resemblance to Brooks' ex-wife. This wasn't a disgruntled manager seeking petty vengeance. It was the unhinged rampage of a man lost in a delusional fantasy, looking to replace past failures with fresh kills. Jake picked up his phone with a shaky hand. Roberts, it's not random. Brooks is reenacting past trauma, targeting surrogates who look like his ex-wife. He's mentally unstable, and this will only escalate. The more he's cornered. A heavy silence followed before Roberts replied grimly. You might be right. We just found another body in a nearby parking structure. Same MO. Looks like your profile is spot on, unfortunately. Jake's blood ran cold as he realized who the latest victim must be. Send me the case files and photos now. I need to confirm something. Moments later, the files loaded, confirming his worst fears. The man lying in a pool of blood was none other than Steve, his co-worker who had lost his wife the night before. Brooks was systematically working his way through those, resembling his ex, and with Jake's analysis now public, he had painted a target on his own back. He had to find Brooks, and fast, before the deranged killer added him to his growing list of victims. But first, Jake would have to confront the demons holding him back and face his greatest fears. It was time to leave isolation behind and take the fight to Brooks before any more innocent lives were lost. Rushing to the police station, Jake briefed Roberts on his theory. Brooks will be fixated on completing his mission. He knows I'm onto him, so I'm likely next. Use me as bait. Let me draw him out into the open. Roberts looked uneasy. You sure about this? Guy's already killed 5 people in cold blood. Jake steeled his nerves. This was about more than just stopping one madman. It was a chance to lay his own ghosts to rest once and for all. I have to do this. It's the only way to end this before anyone else dies, because of me. A plan was hatched to have Jake return to the stadium, knowing Brooks would be lurking nearby to finish what he started. Police would monitor from a safe distance, ready to move in for the capture. But Jake knew, deep down, it wouldn't be that simple. To defeat a killer so lost in delusion would require facing him on his own twisted terms. As dusk fell, Jake made his way onto the empty stadium grounds, the echoes of past screams still ringing in his ears. He paced slowly along the perimeter, eyes scanning for any sign of the lurking madman. A chill ran down his spine as a voice called out from the shadows. I've been waiting for you, Jake. Stepping into the dim light, Daniel Brooks emerged with a sinister smile, pistol raised. Let's finish what we started. Shall we? Jake froze as Brooks slowly circled him, gun trained on his chest. His mind raced, trying to buy time until help arrived. Why are you doing this, Daniel? Revenge won't undo the past. Brooks' eyes blazed with an unhinged fury. These people took everything from me. Now they'll pay for her sins over and over again. Jake knew he had to keep Brooks talking and distracted long enough for backup to move in. But confronting his own trauma was the only way to understand this killer's twisted motivation. There was an incident many years ago that left me afraid of crowds. One night in college during a house party, things got out of hand. Brooks paused, sensing Jake's unease. Do tell. This sounds interesting. Jake steeled himself to face the memories he'd buried for so long. I was at a frat party with some friends. Too many people crammed inside as the night wore on. Drinks were flowing freely, and tensions rose. A fight broke out in one of the bedrooms over something trivial, but the shoving soon turned violent as others joined in. By the time I pushed my way through the crowd, it was too late. One of the guys involved was lying unconscious on the floor, blood pooling from his head. Mass hysteria took over as people scrambled to flee, trampling anyone in their path. I tried helping my friend, but was knocked aside by the stampede. All I could do was watch in horror as the life drained from his eyes. That's when the real nightmare began. For weeks, I was plagued by flashbacks and panic attacks. Large groups became my greatest fear, reminding me of that night. I withdrew from friends and isolated myself to feel safe. But the guilt and trauma never fully went away. It shaped me into the recluse I became, just trying to survive each day with the painful memories. Jake fell silent, chest heaving from reliving the ordeal. Brooks regarded him with an unnerving calmness. So we both have our demons, it seems, though mine will never be laid to rest. In that moment, Jake saw his own anguish reflected in Brooks' deadened eyes, both haunted by past failures that could never be undone. But while Jake had learned to cope, Brooks was lost in an endless cycle of vengeance. There was only one way to break that cycle for good. I understand your pain, Daniel, but this path will only breed more suffering for us all. Please, put down the gun before anyone else gets hurt. We both deserve a chance at peace. A flicker of hesitation crossed Brooks' face. Maybe you're right. I'm so tired of running from my failures. In a swift motion, he lowered the pistol, holding it out for Jake. It's over. Without warning, Brooks whipped around, gun rising once more. Too late, Jake saw a figure emerge from the shadows behind them. Detective Roberts stood with his weapon drawn, flanked by backup. It's over. Brooks, drop the weapon now. Brooks let out an anguished howl of rage. You tricked me. Now she'll never be avenged. In one fluid motion, he spun towards Jake, finger tightening on the trigger. Time slowed to a crawl as adrenaline surged through Jake's veins. All his fears and trauma fell away in that split second. There was only one clear thought. He had to save Roberts and end this, once and for all. Summoning every ounce of courage, Jake lunged forward, just as a deafening crack split the air. His shoulder exploded in a blaze of agony as the bullet tore through flesh and bone. But he didn't stop, barreling into Brooks with all his momentum. The two men crashed to the ground in a tangled heap. Jake ignored the fire raging in his shoulder, grappling for the pistol with his good arm. A second shot rang out, then another. Finally, Brooks went limp beneath him. Jake rolled off shakily to see Roberts lowering his smoking weapon, backup flooding the area with lights. It's over, he gasped, collapsing back in relief and pain. For the first time in years, Jake felt free. Jake awoke to the sterile smell of antiseptic. Bright lights stabbed at his eyes as he tried opening them. Every inch of his body ached, but the fiery pain in his shoulder had dulled to a throb. A nurse noticed him stirring and rushed over. Welcome back. You had us worried for a bit. Try not to move too much. That was a nasty wound. Jake glanced down at his heavily bandaged shoulder, fractured collarbone, and some muscle damage. The doc said, "You're damn lucky it missed any major arteries." He remembered the gunshot, barreling into Brooks to save Roberts. It was over. Brooks was dead and could no longer harm others. But was it really finished? What if there were more targets the deranged killer had planned to strike? As if reading his thoughts, Detective Roberts entered with a solemn expression. "Glad to see you awake. How's the shoulder holding up?" "It'll heal. Any other victims after last night?" Jake asked anxiously. "None so far, thanks to you. Ballistics confirmed Brooks was our shooter all along. Case is closed as far as we're concerned." But Jake wasn't convinced. Something didn't add up about Brooks' meticulous planning only to be stopped so easily. There has to be more to this. "Did you find any notes, computers, anything at his home?" Roberts sighed. "We searched the place, but came up empty. Guy was practically a ghost online too." "Why? You think there might be other targets?" Jake closed his eyes, replaying every detail. Brooks' vendetta was personal, not random. He targeted surrogates with meaning. There has to be one last piece to this puzzle I'm missing. Give me a day to go over the case files again. Maybe a fresh set of eyes will catch something we overlooked. Roberts looked uneasy, but agreed, knowing Jake's insight had cracked the case so far. That evening, Jake pored over case notes and photos from his hospital bed. Nothing new jumped out until he came across an old employee photo of Brooks and his former team. That's when he noticed a man standing beside Brooks, smiling awkwardly. Jake pulled up the guy's profile. Thomas Wilson, former co-worker who had left the company years ago. Digging deeper, he found a disturbing connection. Wilson had been the best man at Brooks' wedding and godfather to his daughter. A cold chill ran down Jake's spine. Wilson was the last thread tying Brooks to his past life. Rushing to call Roberts, his fears were confirmed. Wilson was missing, last seen days ago. It all made sense now, in the sickest of ways. Brooks had one final surrogate left to enact his twisted vengeance upon. And Wilson, the man who had witnessed Brooks' entire downward spiral, was the perfect target. Jake knew he had to find Wilson before it was too late. Shoulder be damned. The real game of cat and mouse was only just beginning. Jake raced to Brooks' last known address, praying for a clue. Searching the empty home, a glint under the couch caught his eye. Wincing, he reached down to retrieve an old flash drive labeled 2. His heart sank as photos loaded of Wilson and his family. The final pieces fell into place as Jake realized Brooks' endgame. He had to get to Wilson first, before the madman's last dying wish was fulfilled. But would he make it in time to save the life of the one man who held all the dark secrets? Jake sped towards the abandoned warehouse district, sirens blaring. According to location data on the flash drive, this was where Brooks had been holding Wilson captive for days. He prayed he wasn't too late, as tires screeched to a halt outside the largest dilapidated building. Grabbing his gun left-handed, Jake entered cautiously through a side door. The interior was eerily silent as his footsteps echoed in the vast open space. A faint whimpering drew Jake towards the back, weapon raised. Peeking around a massive support beam, he froze in horror. Wilson was strapped to a chair, barely conscious with cuts and bruises covering his body. Standing behind him calmly was a figure Jake had hoped was dead. Brooks smiled sadly at Jake's stunned expression. "I knew you'd find me in the end. Can't let old ghosts rest, can we?" Now it's time to finish what I started all those years ago. Jake kept his voice level, stalling for backup. It's over, Daniel. Put down the knife before anyone else gets hurt. Brooks let out a mirthless chuckle. We both know that's not how this ends. After tonight, I'll finally be at peace, and she'll be avenged through him, like the others. In one swift motion, Brooks drew the blade across Wilson's throat in a crimson spray. A guttural howl of anguish tore from his lips as Wilson collapsed, gurgling his final breaths. No. Jake lunged forward on instinct, forgetting his injury. Brooks met him with a savage blow that sent stars exploding behind Jake's eyes. He crashed to the floor, disoriented as Brooks loomed over him with the bloodied knife. You just don't know when to quit, do you, boy? No matter. Soon you'll join the others, and it will all be over. Brooks raised the blade high, crazed eyes alight with a messianic fury. This is for you, my love. As the knife arced downwards, Jake summoned his last reserves of strength. Rolling aside, he brought his good arm up in a vice grip around Brooks' wrist. They grappled fiercely, the knife flickering between them, coming perilously close to vital organs with each struggle. Where's your courage now, Daniel? Jake growled through clenched teeth. Still hiding behind your delusions like a coward. Face me as a man and end this. A feral roar tore from Brooks' throat as primal instincts took over. With a savage twist, he wrenched free of Jake's hold and lunged at his throat with bare hands. They crashed to the floor in a blur of flailing limbs, Jake's injured shoulder exploding in agony. Through the haze of pain, Jake saw the glint of steel once more. With his last ounce of will, he grasped the hilt and twisted it aside, just as Brooks bore down. The knife plunged into flesh with a wet thud, followed by an agonized gasp. Brooks' eyes bulged in shock at the handle protruding from his chest. His hand scrabbled weakly at the wound as crimson bubbled from his lips. With a final shuddering breath, the light faded from his eyes forever. Jake rolled free, collapsing back in a daze. It was finally over. Brooks' rampage had ended, along with the ghosts that had haunted them both for so long. As sirens wailed in the distance, Jake let the darkness take him at last, succumbing to exhaustion and injuries. But for the first time in years, it was a restful sleep, without nightmares. Jake awoke to the familiar sterile smell of his hospital room. His shoulder had been redressed, and the pain was a dull throb. As his mind cleared, the memories came flooding back. The warehouse, his final confrontation with Brooks. It was over at last. A knock at the door pulled Jake from his thoughts. Detective Roberts entered, expression grim. We identified Wilson's body and notified his family. It's an absolute tragedy after everything they've been through. Jake nodded solemnly. At least Brooks can't hurt anyone else now. His rampage is finally at an end. Roberts regarded him thoughtfully. You know, none of this would be solved without your help. You should be proud of facing your fears to stop that madman. A bittersweet smile touched Jake's lips. I think this whole ordeal helped lay some ghosts of my own to rest too. Facing trauma head-on was the only way I could truly move on. From that night at the frat party onwards, large crowds had been my greatest fear, a reminder of failure and guilt. But facing the real monster within Brooks showed me there are far worse evils in the world. It was time to stop running. Roberts clapped a hand on Jake's good shoulder. You found courage when it mattered most. Don't sell yourself short. Now get some rest. You've earned it." With that, he took his leave, closing the door behind him. In the silence, Jake's thoughts drifted to the long road of recovery ahead, physically and mentally. It would be a challenge. But for the first time in years, the future held promise rather than dread. He had confronted his past and emerged stronger, no longer defined by one tragic night. As the sun set in a blaze of color beyond the window, Jake smiled contentedly. A new dawn was on the horizon, filled with possibilities instead of panic. He had taken that fateful shot in the stadium and come out on the other side, laying ghosts to rest at last. From here, only brighter days lay ahead. His long isolation was over. It was time to truly begin living again. 1 year later, Jake stepped into the bustling stadium, breathing deep the familiar sense of popcorn and excitement. So much had changed since that fateful night. That set him on a path of courage and healing. His shoulder had fully recovered, as had the mental and emotional wounds slowly over time. True to his word, Jake left isolation behind, reconnecting with old friends, and even venturing back into the dating world. Life was rich with new beginnings. As the opening buzzer sounded and cheers erupted, Jake took his seat with a smile, ready to get lost in the game. Large crowds no longer stirred panic or trauma. They were a reminder of his triumph over fear that night, and all he had gained by facing the demons of his past. Where there was once terror, now there was only joy and gratitude. Jake's shot had changed far more than just ending a killer's rampage. It was the shot heard round the world that set him free at last. And as the final buzzer sounded on another victory, Jake left the stadium feeling lighter than ever, excited to see where this new chapter in his life would lead. His future was truly his own to write at last.